Welcome to our channel. Today, we're breaking down a powerful film that dives deep into the chaos of a divided America. This gripping story follows Lee Smith, a fearless war photographer who puts herself on the front lines to capture the brutal truth of a nation at war. Stay tuned as we follow her dangerous journey filled with courage, conflict, and survival. The movie begins with the president addressing the nation during a tense press conference. He tries to project confidence as he announces that victory is near, though the fear and unease beneath his words are obvious. The president boasts about delivering a crushing blow to the Western forces, calling it one of the greatest victories in history. He then issues a stern warning to Texas and California, demanding they abandon their secessionist governments and return to the Union. He also criticizes the Florida Alliance for failing to convince the Carolinians to join their cause, but promises that a decisive and historic victory over the rebels is coming soon. The scene shifts to Lee Smith, who is listening intently to the broadcast. Lee has made a name for herself, documenting the horrors of war through her photography. The next day, Lee and her colleague Joe arrive at the scene of a violent riot. Protesters clash with heavily armed police as chaos erupts around them. Lee fearlessly moves through the danger, taking photos without hesitation. In the middle of the chaos, a young photographer named Jessie Collins is struck in the face. Lee rushes to her side, offering her a Kevlar vest. Jessie is stunned to meet Lee, who advises her to be cautious. Suddenly, the roar of an approaching helicopter cuts through the noise. Moments later, a bomb drops. Lee throws herself over Jessie, shielding her from the explosion that kills many around them. When the dust settles, Jessie watches in awe as Lee calmly walks through the destruction, capturing haunting images of the dead and dying. Later that evening, Lee, Joe, and their friend Sammy regroup at a hotel. Joe predicts that the Western forces will overthrow the president by June 4th, but Sammy disagrees. He believes that after defeating the president, the Western forces and the Florida Alliance will eventually turn on each other. When Sammy asks about their plans, he's shocked to learn that Lee and Joe are heading to Washington, D.C. to cover the story. Sammy warns them it's a suicide mission. Joe remains optimistic, pointing out that the president hasn't given an interview in over 14 months. Their coverage could be the final record of him. Though nervous, Sammy agrees to give them directions for the safest route, admitting he once considered taking the same path. However, Sammy reveals his own plan, to head to the front lines in Charlottesville. Lee and Joe feel it's too dangerous to bring him along. As Lee heads upstairs to her room, she runs into Jessie, who returns the vest and expresses her desire to join them. She reveals that Lee is her role model, even sharing the same first name as Lee Miller, another famous photographer. Lee brushes her off, clearly unhappy about the idea of Jessie coming along. That night, Jessie sits alone in her bathtub, haunted by the brutal images of war she's witnessed, people she photographed in their final moments, powerless to save them. The next morning, Lee discovers Jessie hiding in their car. Joe reminds Lee that they already agreed to let an older man like Sammy join, and that everyone has to start somewhere. Lee reluctantly agrees, but on one condition: Jessie must stop at Charlottesville. As they travel, they stop for gas and encounter 3 armed men who refuse to let them refuel. Lee steps in and negotiates a deal: $300 Canadian dollars for a full tank and 2 extra gallons. While waiting, Jessie wanders off and comes across 2 dead men hanging inside a garage. A dangerous man approaches her, trying to intimidate her with gruesome stories. Lee quickly intervenes, distracting him by asking to take his picture. Back in the car, Jessie is shaken and admits she forgot to secure her camera gear. Lee snaps at her, warning her that small mistakes could cost lives. Sammy calms Lee down, but when Lee blames Joe for allowing Jessie to come, Jessie breaks down in tears and promises to do better. Later, Lee orders Jessie to photograph a wrecked helicopter. Lee learns the cameras belong to Jesse's father, who lives on a farm in Missouri, pretending the war doesn't exist. That night, Lee confides in Sammy. She admits she once believed her photos could help prevent the war, but here they are, stuck in the middle of it. Sammy questions why Lee is so protective of Jesse, pointing out that Lee started her career at an even younger age. The next morning, the group finds themselves embedded with WF soldiers battling the American military. Jesse documents the violence, capturing shocking images, including the execution of 3 captured soldiers. Later, they reach a military camp, roughly 465 kilometers from D.C. Jesse and Lee share a quiet moment. Jesse asks about Lee's family, and Lee reveals that her parents, like Jesse's, pretend the war isn't happening. The next day, they arrive in a peaceful town that feels completely untouched by the conflict. Joe jokes that it's like stepping into another world. Jesse convinces Lee to try on a dress and snaps her picture, making Lee blush. But Sammy notices armed men on rooftops, a grim reminder that war is never far away. As they leave, they come across a dead body blocking the road. A sniper's bullet suddenly strikes, forcing them to take cover. Joe manages to approach the snipers and learns they are just trying to survive by killing those who would kill them first. As they continue their journey, Lee notices a car following them. It turns out to be Joe's friends, Tony and Bohai. After a tense exchange, Tony switches to Lee's vehicle and Jesse switches cars too. Soon, Lee loses sight of Bohai's car and panics. When she finally finds it, she discovers Jesse and Bohai being led by soldiers toward a truck filled with bodies. Sammy warns that the soldiers don't want witnesses, but Lee refuses to abandon them. Lee, Joe, and Tony storm in to save their friends. In the chaos, Lee realizes the president is still inside the building. They sneak past enemy forces and discover a hauntingly empty space. Suddenly, soldiers appear and execute a woman trying to negotiate the president's surrender. Moments later, another group ambushes them. During the shootout, Jesse steps out to take photos and becomes a target. Lee dives in front of her, taking the bullets meant for Jesse. Jesse accidentally captures the moment Lee is killed. Devastated, Jesse flees the scene in shock. Meanwhile, Joe finds the president, who pleads desperately for his life. Joe asks for a final statement and the president stammers, "Don't let them kill me." Moments later, WF soldiers execute him without mercy. And that concludes this harrowing journey through a fractured nation. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss our latest breakdowns. Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear what you think about this powerful story.